Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this special edition of the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm here with AgJack from the AgKnocks podcast for the Aggies, and he's here to tell us about the 2024 Aggies and, well, generally about what this matchup should look at from the Aggies' perspective. How are you doing tonight, Jack?
Doing great, Daniel. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about this game. Excited for this weekend. We're just getting started this season.
For sure. It's only game 3. It's kind of weird that we're kicking off the SEC slate. I know you guys are as well against each other. Not too many times we've done that, for sure.
The first time we did it was the first year we were in the SEC, and I actually attended that game. It was Johnny Manziel's first collegiate start for Texas A&M. And that was the reason I decided to end up going to Texas A&M, because I watched Johnny's first game and I got hooked after that when I went to Kyle Field for the first time.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, for our perspective, that was a whole lot of fun. Mike Gillisley having a good day on the ground for the Gators. And also, you can see a guy like a Johnny Manziel and say, that guy's going to be great, just from that performance. And if I'm right, that was even your season debut because you got a game canceled due to a hurricane.
Something like that. I don't remember what it was. It was the first game of the season, and I remember a lot of side to side bull crap that ended up getting someone in Spavital fired. But we saw a little bit of greatness in Johnny. No one knew who he was when we showed up. We're like, all right, there's a quarterback competition. Let's see what this kid's got. And it was like, hold on, maybe there's something here.
Yeah, and lo and behold, 12 years later, 13th season, the SEC, here we go. Starting off against the Gators. Same thing that happened last expansion, I guess we could say, except for this time,
exactly.
It's your rival coming in Oklahoma. But I guess before we begin, tell the listeners or anyone watching this a little about yourself and the AgKnocks podcast, just so we know where you're coming from.
Sure. So AgKnocks started 3 years ago with me and my college roommates. We wanted to kind of start something where it felt like sitting in our living room after we got home from a game at Kyle Field, just like that type of feel. Just college guys having fun, kicking it, being real, and not trying to go the formal route like ESPN, kind of leaning more towards a barstool thing. We like to have fun with it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of us in the college huddle try and be a little bit separate from what you traditionally see media-wise and just have a little bit of fun with it. So getting into the Aggies in 2024, can you give us an overview of what they look like for those of us who have maybe just seen clips?
Yeah, it's weird, right? So we come into a season, Mike Elko's first year as head coach. His return, he was a defensive coordinator under Jimbo Fisher for a few years beforehand. We were all excited about Elko, what he brings to the table. He brings discipline, he brings accountability, kind of things that were lacking with Jimbo. And we expected the defense to be great. We expected the quarterback to return from injury and be great. Connor Wigman had looked phenomenal in pretty much every time he played before this season. In that Notre Dame game, he was the worst graded quarterback, I think, by PFF in the country. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was absolutely miserable. He's missing routine throws, wide open guys, and we were all just kind of shell-shocked by his play in that game because it felt like above average to elite quarterback play was going to be a given this year. So having said that, we came into the season with some worries about offensive line. We felt like the defense would be stout. And to be honest with you, to this point, the run defense has not been that good, and the quarterback play has been a little bit shaky. Connor bounced back last week against McNeese State, but it's McNeese State. So we're hoping he kind of gains some confidence in that game going into the Swamp.
So what would you say, going to the Swamp, what would you say the strengths of this Aggies team is?
Honestly, I think the secondary's done a good job. The defense in general should be a strong point for this team. And the run game, I think Le'Veon Moss and the offensive line they've stepped up. Le'Veon Moss is the running back. He's looked really strong and quick this year. And they've kind of got a 3-headed monster there with Terry Bussey and Amari Daniels. So it'll be running back by committee. And if they can run the ball and play defense like we think they can, that's kind of Elko ball for us. We think that they can be successful.
Awesome. And what about weaknesses? Again, for those of us that maybe, or some fans that maybe have only seen the Notre Dame game and maybe making thoughts on Connor that maybe aren't true to the best. I know he was good his true freshman year, and we avoided him due to a flu outbreak. But what would you say weaknesses are outside of maybe quarterback play, which we know may have just been a one-game thing?
Yeah, I mean, outside of quarterback play, like I mentioned, run defense has been a little bit of a struggle so far, but that's kind of something that kind of molds as the year goes along, as the games are played out. So we're hoping that that's going to improve. Positionally, I don't really see like something that stands out to me. The wide receivers haven't been phenomenal. There hasn't been a lot of separation created, not a lot of big play opportunities yet. And honestly, the offensive line has performed better than we thought they would. We lost our starting center, Mark Naboo, torn ACL first game of the season, but they held up last week. We'll see what they do against SEC opponent.
Yeah, and I've got to say, very similar for both of us, playing big-time first games, playing an FCS opponent week 2, so it's really curious to see which team really is where they are, for sure. So for this game coming up on Saturday, what, in your perspective, must the Aggies do to come away with the win on the road in the Swamp?
I think Connor's just got to be Connor Wegman the way that we thought he was going to be. If he comes out flat like he did against Notre Dame, we're going to probably score under 20 points. And, you know, with what we're facing up against in the Swamp, an SEC game, I don't care if Florida's having a down year or not. Billy Napier's trying to get fired. I don't know what it is. The Aggies will find a way to maybe not under Elko versus Jimbo. If this was a Jimbo game, I'd say they'd find a way to lose the game, but that's just what we're used to. I think that it's just, if Connor's in rhythm, they'll be okay. If he's out of whack early on, you'll probably be able to tell, and we'll see what happens from there.
And I guess, and it's funny you bring up finding a way to lose, because I know there are Florida fans who kind of feel the same way after, you know, the last few years where we should have beaten Arkansas at home, but then we get a stupid penalty that moves us back 5 yards, miss a game-winning field goal, and then lose in overtime, or give up 4th and 17, you know, to Missouri last year and lose on a last-second field goal. So it's kind of interesting that you bring that up, and here we are, you know, across the Gulf of Mexico having the same thoughts about how are we going to lose. So this might be who can find a way to lose game, but just in case, in your perspective from the Aggies, what do you think the Gators need to do to be able to pull the upset, since it seems like we're the home team but the underdogs in this one?
I would say if things hold up the way that they have been this season, so let's say that we're still struggling run defensively, we're still struggling with our quarterback getting in rhythm, I would say just bring the pressure on defense and run the ball on offense. And it'll probably be a low-scoring game, but that's going to be your best shot, is just kind of getting into a scrum with us and coming out at the end.
Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of Gators are tired of close one-score games because, again, like the two I talked about, somehow they've gone against us recently. But I would say, and I don't know how much you've been able to look into it. Of course, we've had Graham Mertz, who started last year, and he started the Miami game, got injured, didn't play this weekend. I don't know if you had a chance to see any DJ Lagway highlights. Do you think there's anything Mike Elko does differently depending on who the quarterback ends up being?
I think he's mentioned that in his presser today, that he kind of sees what you guys are doing as a dual threat, multiple quarterbacks. We've got to be ready for anything. I think the quote was that you guys are going to be able to paralyze opponents with a threat like that. So we'll be ready for it. And if I would trust anybody, I'd trust Elko to defensively scheme this up and be okay with it. I personally would be more afraid to see Lagway the whole game, but it sounds like Billy Napier might want to just get this buyout and get out of here. So If you guys go with Graham Mertz and he can sit back there and let our front seven tee off, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, and we'll see how that turns out. I'm very curious, because our offense hasn't been great, but it's never been quite as disastrous as it really was against Miami. So we'll see, especially with a defensive mind like Elko, that I really respect. What we're going to see on Saturday with that. But before I let you go, just have a few fun questions for you, just having to do a little bit with A&M, and maybe you can help answer some questions that some Gators have. What does Hullabaloo Connect mean?
You're asking the wrong person.
I figured it's the beginning of your fight song. Maybe you could tell.
I don't know what the hell it means, man.
It's just part of the fight song, right?
It's noise. It sounds.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And then another fun one that I'm sure this one you'll be able to answer. What does the song "The Eyes of Texas" sound like to you?
Sounds like hell.
Sounds like hell. And fans of my podcast probably heard 2 years ago, if they were listening then. I've gotten a lot of new listeners in the last year or two. But one thing I said was one of my favorite fight songs is Texas A&M's, because it is just a very, in my opinion, petty, but awesomely petty. Just big metaphorical middle finger to Texas.
It's a diss track to Texas. Yep.
There you go. There you go. And so definitely something that makes me smile, and it does every once in a while get stuck in my head if I've just watched an A&M sporting event, whether it's against Florida, or I'm just like, hey, look, A&M's on and Florida's not playing. I'm going to give that a watch. But yeah, for sure. Is there any last thoughts you have about this matchup before I let you go?
No, I mean, I was going to ask you how you guys felt about Billy Napier, where you stand overall, and like how you feel about your chances in this game.
Okay, well, sure thing. As far as Billy goes, I've told my listeners that I said in the preseason, a good coach goes 6-1 against the front half of the schedule, whether it's, facing a lot of new quarterbacks, whether it's facing a first-year coach like Elko. Granted, I also said you're in year 3, you're playing a rival game 1, you've got to win that one. But I'm giving him that chance to, meet that 6-1, because that last 5 is going to be really hard. And I think you've got to get a winning record, and the best chance at that is going 6-1 in that early stretch before you face, Georgia and Texas in back-to-back weeks, followed by LSU, Ole Miss, who may be great, and then finishing up in Doak Campbell Stadium against the Seminoles. So it's a tough back row. So you've got to get on the front end. And I don't know if we get there, but me personally, I'm waiting to see. As far as this game, from what was indicated, we had the press conference earlier today. For those watching this or listening, this was recorded Monday night, and it was an indicated by Billy Napier that if Graham Mertz is cleared to go, then he's going to play and going to start. And I'm curious to see if Texas A&M's defense, and especially Mike Elko, shuts down the offense like Miami did. And if they do, how long does Billy Napier wait to go to DJ Lagway? With him being on the hot seat, maybe he goes earlier, or maybe he, as he put it, sticks to the plan. The problem is the plan is, I'm going to play Lagway a little bit in each game. He didn't play Lagway in Miami until an injury forced his hand. So I'm curious to see what that'll do. I think if we see Lagway, there's a much better chance. Granted, you brought up your run defense has been not the best, at least right now. So I would say we're a very run heavy team. If we can get the run game going, which is what Billy Napier likes to do, I think we've got a great chance. The problem is our O-line has been not great at run blocking. Even against Samford this past week, We had on our first offensive drive, we have a 4th and 1 going to a Wildcat, and we can't even get 1 yard on Samford. Had some success outside the tackles, but between the tackles, not as much. So I think there's a chance for Florida win this, but the biggest thing that I believe the Gators need to do is keep the fans invested against Miami. Fans stopped being invested pretty early when we couldn't move the ball, and Miami moved the ball at will. So the swamp wasn't really the swamp. It wasn't as loud as usual. And most people that have been there would say, yeah, that's not really a great atmosphere. But if we can keep that great atmosphere and maybe get bad Wegman play, I think we can pull it off. But we'll see. We also have a few injuries that I'm waiting to see whether they clear or not, like one of our starting corners, which even though you've struggled in the past game, we were talking ahead of time about how someone had brought up Florida's allowed, career days, several times in the past few years, even against suspect teams or teams that are mediocre. So getting like Devin Moore, who's our injured cornerback, would go a long way. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think there's a very chance it does become that low scoring affair you're talking about. Just because you're talking about, you guys have had a little bit of offense issues at times. We definitely have had offense issues, and it might come down to defense. And I'll be honest, if it comes down to defenses, you guys have the edge with Mike Elko, but we'll see. Hopefully it'll be a fun game in the swamp. I know for me, hopefully we win. For you, you're like, hopefully the Aggies win. But,
one question.
Yeah.
Finish the sentence. Billy Napier gets fired before the press conference after the game if blank.
If A&M blows out Florida.
So you think it could happen?
I don't know if it gets fired before the press conference. But
yeah.
Possibly before his Monday press conference if he gets blown out again. There are a lot of people who are unhappy about Miami. From what I understand, a lot of people that have a lot of sway were very unhappy with starting out year 3 like that. If you're year 1 like that, if you lose close to Miami, not really feeling it. But if you come out in your 2 FBS games back to back are blowout losses, could be interesting to see if he goes to Starkville next week with the team, but that remains to be seen. I think if we lose to the Aggies close, it doesn't happen, but I think if we get blown out for sure, he might. I'm saying might for all my listeners about to go in the comments.
It feels like a measuring stick game for sure. I would say. I mean, for us, It's like, can Elko go in there and get a big SEC win on the road? For y'all, is this going to be Billy Napier's like final stand versus, turning the season around? Yep.
And it'll be interesting because if he survives this game, then you go to Starkville that ended one Florida coach's career. So it'll be it's a very interesting season to be a Gator fan. I will say that.
It sure is. That was us last year, man.
Yep. And hopefully Elko does it for you. Like I said to my listeners before, I think I said to you beforehand, if we're facing you guys in game 8, 9, 10, and 11, I'm a lot more nervous than I am right now. And that's not to say I'm not nervous, just you're still getting used, you're still easing into the Mike Elko era versus having solid footing. So it'll be a good time for sure. And hopefully maybe next year I'll come and see you in Kyle Field and enjoy a bit of that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. I appreciate you having me on. It was a good time and good luck.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on, and I'll talk to you later. For everyone else, be sure to check out the preview coming out tomorrow. Thank you and for listening. And as always, go Gators.